Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, February 21st, 2021, and today we're going to be taking a look at President Joe Biden's approval rating, and pretty much this is my second part of a many-part series of me tracking Joe Biden's approval rating, talking about its electoral implications, talking about why his approval rating might be reaching a certain point. And as of today, according to 538, Joe Biden has a 54.5% approval rating with a 38.1% disapproval rating, an overall net positive of 16 percentage points amongst the American electorate. If we break it down to polls of likely or registered voters, it actually brings up the approval rating to 54.8%, but the disapproval rating also increases to 38.8%. If you do polls of all adults, it actually brings us down in terms of the approval, but also the disapproval rating goes down as well. It means that there's more of an undecided vote here, but it is pretty interesting that they do defer. The same way that they did, I would say, with the Trump approval rating, which we'll take a look at just a moment just to compare it. But looking at this approval rating, pretty much he's hovering around the 54% margin at 54.5% on average, 45% if you want to round up, but I would say 54, 55 is the ballpark for the Joe Biden approval rating. And as we can see, throughout the entirety of his presidency, which isn't too long. I mean, we're talking a month here, exactly a month and 1 day. But the approval rating hasn't really gotten higher than 55%. In fact, for a significant portion of it, it was lower than it currently is today. But the disapproval rating was certainly lower as well. I mean, 34.6%, rising all the way up to 38%. Well, that's roughly 4% of the electorate that flipped away from Joe Biden. But still, looking at the approval rating and the disapproval rating, they're hovering around even. The most we saw in terms of the overall split was around, I think, maybe around here when it was around 19 points in the positive for Joe Biden, but 16 points in the positive is nothing to scoff at. It's still pretty strong for the president of the United States. And what we see actually is that these recent few polls, all of them are consistent except for one, and that's Rasmussen Reports, which is the C-plus rated pollster that polls the approval rating of the president, almost always favored Donald Trump in their polls 100% of the time. Looking at these new numbers, well, what do we see? The approve is 49%, disapprove is 49%. But 538 actually adjusts for bias, adjusts for the inaccuracies that are done in these polls, and shows that according to their own data, the number should actually be 51 to 43. You can actually do a little bit more research into how this methodology is finalized and how they do these ratings, how they give them the rating of C+, but it goes into a number of things: methodology, historical accuracy, and Rasmussen Reports typically and almost always skewed to the right. In fact, it showed Donald Trump with a positive approval rating as he left office, which we can take a look at in just a moment. And I do this partially to compare where Donald Trump was back in his first term, back in his first month of office. And I know, we have a lot more to go. We have 3 more years to go, more than that, really. But looking at the approval rating around this time period, let's talk about February 21st, but it actually was on the 19th, so let's just do the 19th. Donald Trump had a 50.6% disapproval rating and a 44% approval rating. Now, that 44% number is higher than most periods of his presidency. I mean, throughout the entire thing, he didn't really reach 44%, only during a small blip where his approval rating was really high due to the way he was handling COVID-19, and ended off with a 38.6% approval rating. So it certainly was higher on February 19th, 2017. And that 50.7%, 6% disapproval rating brings us to a point where it was overall a net negative of 6.5%. Negative 6.5% nationwide. And, that wasn't too good for Donald Trump. We were talking a month into his presidency, but at the same time, the American people were just never too happy with President Trump. That's why he didn't win his election, the first president to lose re-election since George H.W. Bush. That was in 1988 when H.W. Bush was elected. So Donald Trump is someone who, I guess, went against expectations. People expected him to win again. I didn't expect him to win, but many people did. People thought there would be an upset again. And while there was an upset in its own way, Donald Trump still ended up losing. And, this was a clear indicator from the beginning that if the American people weren't happy with him, and to be honest, I mean, it was right around where it was before on Election Day for the same type of approval rating. So he returned to 1 month out of his presidency numbers, which is actually one of the highest points of his entire presidency, which is why it was so close. But throughout the entire thing, there were clear indicators that he was not going to be a popular president for a significant portion of the entire presidency. And by the end, he ended up losing. But looking at the approval rating right then and there, definitely differs from Joe Biden by around 10 points in terms of the approval number and about 12 points in terms of the disapproval number. But let's take a look at Rasmussen Reports. They did a finalized poll here, and they actually showed Donald Trump with a positive approval rating. Every single other one showed him in the negative. Morning Consult, negative 19. Atlas Intel, -9. YouGov, -11. American Research Group, -36. So what you're seeing is, the polls all showed that Donald Trump was disapproved of. I mean, following the Capitol insurrection, he went from, and during this period, once you're defeated, this is your lame duck period. So you are expected for your approval rating to go up because you're not going to do anything boisterous, but as we saw, that simply was not true. Donald Trump's approval rating went from 42.8%, 43%, dipping all the way down to a low point of 38 percentage points because of the way that the Capitol riots were, instigated in part by many members of the Republican Party. And many people say Donald Trump did instigate them himself. And, that's why his approval rating dipped down to unprecedented levels leaving office. In fact, this is the highest disapproval rating of his entire presidency. It's not the lowest approval rating. The lowest was 37%, but the highest disapproval rating of his entire presidency on his final day in office. But Rasmussen Reports shows Donald Trump with a positive 3% approval rating, simply just wanted to skew the average. But it wasn't enough because the numbers are blatantly wrong. But let's take a look at Real Clear Politics. They actually do things a little bit differently. They count in more polls than 538 in terms of the overall average, and they don't adjust. They don't adjust for inaccuracies. They don't rate their pollsters. What they do is they just put them all in an average. And, I think Real Clear Politics actually in some way does skew a little bit to the right. If you take a look at the articles that they cover, they do have selective covering, but that's not the main purpose of this. What we're looking at it is just pure data, and I do break away from it, which is why you haven't seen me use it for quite some time now, because what I see, when you look at the sidebar and what you see with a lot of the reporters on various social media sites, it is kind of unnerving knowing that some of the, agenda that they push isn't exactly, it is partisan, but it's also extremely partisan. It's not just partisan. We're talking about spreading of Breitbart articles and spreading of propaganda, and I just find that to be a little unsettling when I'm looking at numbers that are supposed to be taken with complete, unbiasedness. That's not the right word for it, but you know what I mean. But looking at the approval rating polls, they pretty much reflect exactly what 538 is telling us. The approval rating for President Biden is a little bit lower. And I think that overall, the reason why this is happening is because, number one, Joe Biden is liked as a person. That is true. Throughout the entirety of the campaign, he had been in the unfavorable view of the American people. I guess they don't have the average here, but you can take a look. A lot of red numbers, right? A lot of people did not like Joe Biden as a person. A lot of people. But as the Democratic Party, right around August, we can say, was when they started doing this character campaign. If you watched the DNC, you will know a lot of it was centered around Joe Biden's character, around Kamala Harris's character, around Joe Biden, around family values, about a return to, I would say, actually something that's sort of like a suburban lifestyle. Boring type of life, go to the PTA meetings type of feel. That's what you got from the Bidens. And, that's what you got from the DNC. It was much less about policy. It was much less about Donald Trump throughout than the entire campaign. And while they mentioned him a lot, which makes sense because he's the incumbent president, a lot of it was character building. And we see that the negative red numbers quickly turned into immediate positive ones. Throughout the entire rest of the campaign, he ended up being viewed positively. On election day, he had the Economist YouGov poll right before a +3 approval rating in terms of the way that people viewed him as a person. But throughout the entire, final weeks, as people were early voting, +16, +17, +8, +10, low points of -1 and -1, when the low points used to be -6, -8, -12. The approval rating completely flipped because this character rebuilding moment at the DNC worked. And as the ads started pouring out about Joe Biden's character in a positive aspect from the Democratic Party, it pushed him into being approved of. Well, that directly translated to the rough amount of support that he has in terms of job approval rating. Unfavorable view of him, 40%. Disapprove of his job, 39.4, a difference of 0.6. Like him, 52%. Like his job performance, 54%, a difference of 2.3%. Look at those numbers. They are directly correlated. I can guarantee you, if people didn't like him as a person, they'd be much more inclined to not like the job he's doing as an office holder. But as we got closer to the general election, people started to like Biden. And in turn, after he was inaugurated, people started to like the way he was handling his job performance. And this also has to do with COVID-19 vaccine distribution. This has to do with COVID-19 handling. We'll talk about vaccinations, and then we'll talk about the COVID-19 cases that are going down. So they ask, this is a New York Times article, or not article, interactive, part of the COVID-19 tracking system they've set up. And they ask, how quickly are shots going in arms? And they say roughly 1.52 million doses per day, on average. Now, for reference, what did Joe Biden promise? 100 million shots in 100 days? Well, if you divide 100 million by 100, that's 1 million shots per day. This means Joe Biden is on track to surpass his promise, possibly reach 150 million doses per day within the first 100 days. Not per day. That'd be insane. 150 million doses by the end of the 100 days in office. Looking at these past few days, very high numbers. 1.7 million doses on February 20th, 1.8 million doses on February 19th, 1.4 million doses on February 18th. On a low point day, 1 million doses, which still surpasses Joe Biden's expectations and the promise that he made. And while the promise may not be as robust as scientists would want it to be, that's what the American people are going to remember. The 100 million shots in 100 days is surpassed. It doesn't matter if this promise was already lackluster and lowballing what they should have done. It still ultimately ends up with Joe Biden being approved of because he met his promise. 2.3 million shots on February 16th. None on February 15th, which I find interesting. February 14th, 2.2 million. February 13th, 2.2 million. February 12th, 2 million. We are talking very high numbers in terms of the doses per day, which is bringing up the average. And a lot of states, specifically red states as well, are getting a lot of people vaccinated. One shot already, which actually we see, I think from a new Pfizer report, is that 93% efficacy after 2 weeks of getting the first shot. I don't think it was directly from Pfizer. I think it was from one of their health distributors. But what we saw was 93% efficient in preventing, I believe, symptoms or even contracting the virus altogether. And, that's good news. And looking at the first dose, what do we see? Yeah, in some of these red states, we still see very high doses. And I think that the only reason why I'm pointing out red states is because it doesn't really matter your political partisanship. Your state is still going to receive COVID-19 vaccines. Your state is still going to see COVID-19 relief. And what does that mean for these states? Well, it means that their view of the president who's in office, who many scientists and many members of the media are going to attribute to this vaccine rollout, to this vaccine distribution. And in some ways, rightfully so. And in some ways, it's just so happens to be that Joe Biden is the president of the United States. Whoever is at the top will receive the blame, but also the benefit of everything that goes on in our country. Economic recovery, that's what you remember Bill Clinton for. Some historians would argue maybe it's because of the policies implemented by the Republican and Democratic Party, but not directly of Bill Clinton. But he's remembered for the economic growth. Let's talk about what happened with President Obama. Many people attribute him to recovering the economy. I do so myself, but also some argue the counterpoint, that it wasn't done directly because of President Obama. Obviously, Joe Biden isn't administering every single one of these shots, but because he's president, and we're talking about the electoral implication here, he's just going to receive a popularity bump. Americans are not going to look too deep into how this vaccine got to their state, just more so that they see the headlines. Biden secures 200 million additional doses of the vaccine from Pfizer. Biden makes a mandate that you have to wear a mask on federal property. And because we are starting to see an increase in vaccine distribution and a decrease in coronavirus cases per day, much less cases per day than we see in terms of vaccines being administered. Look at this. We are reaching to around where we were in the middle of the summer. And that's not good. I mean, that is not good. We should be decreasing. But look at the peak. On one day, we received 252,000 new cases. Looking at the end of today, yesterday, 69,000 cases. We are seeing a steady decrease as a result of the steady increase in terms of the vaccinated population. And what I think that we should return to is possibly where we were end of March. That's not, a good position, but it's certainly significantly better than where we were at this point. Tremendously better. And because the cases are going down, people are going to see that, right as Biden took office, right around here, while it was on a decline, it was still at one of its highest points throughout the entirety of the virus. And once he took office, people are going to see, at this point, dip, 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 in a straight decline. It seems as if we might be beating the curve here. And I don't want to say that. I don't want to jinx it. But it does seem as if, we are doing better because of this vaccine distribution. And who's the president? Even if this is a result of what Donald Trump's administration did, even if it isn't, it does not matter who is the ultimate person who got the COVID-19 relief done. It ultimately comes down to who was president at the time. Under the virus, it was Donald Trump. Currently, it was Joe Biden. And, looking at the way that the American electorate skews, whoever is in office will receive the blame and the benefit of everything that happens in this country. And that's my Joe Biden approval rating update. around a month out after his presidency. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my other tracking Biden video. It's only one for right now, but this playlist will start to fill up as we start getting through it. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.